Hello, and welcome to Mind Sherlock, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today, I bring you a brand new Sherlock Holmes mystery, filled with twists, clues, and clever deductions. Make yourself comfortable, and let's unravel the case together. And if you'd like, leave a quick comment and tell me where you're joining from. It's always a pleasure to know where our little detective community is tuning in from. Now, let's get started. It was upon one of those nights, when London lay shrouded beneath a relentless downpour, that I found myself seated across from Sherlock Holmes in the warmth of our shared sitting room at 221 B Baker Street. The gas lamps flickered uncertainly in the wind, casting wavering shadows upon the walls, while the relentless tapping of rain upon the window pane added a peculiar rhythm to the silence. Holmes, ever composed, lounged in his armchair, his long, slender fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes fixed upon the ceiling with an expression of deep contemplation. I knew better than to disturb him when he was in such a state. Past experience had taught me that these periods of apparent inaction were often the prelude to some astonishing burst of deduction. A single candle burned low upon the table, illuminating a half-smoked pipe, a stack of newspapers, and an unopened telegram. Evidence, perhaps, that my friend's mind was already occupied with some matter of interest. For my part, I occupied myself with a medical journal. Though the storm beyond our walls and the eerie stillness within our chambers lent themselves more to distraction than study. The hour was late, and I had resigned myself to an uneventful evening when suddenly there came a most urgent rapping upon our door, sharp and insistent, cutting through the night like the report of a pistol. Holmes' expression did not change, but I noted a gleam of interest in his eyes as he turned his head toward the sound. "A visitor at this hour, Watson," he murmured, rising with deliberate grace. "Let us see what the fates have delivered to our doorstep." The door had scarcely been opened before a figure all but stumbled into our chambers, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. He was a man of noble bearing, yet his attire was in disarray. His cloak sodden, his collar hastily fastened, and his gloved hands trembling as he removed his hat. His dark eyes darted about the room as though fearful of pursuit, and his face, pale beneath the gaslight, bore the unmistakable signs of distress. Holmes observed him keenly, offering no greeting beyond a slight inclination of the head. I, however, stepped forward. "You are unwell, sir. Allow me—" But the man raised a hand, shaking his head. "No, doctor. It is not illness that afflicts me, but a matter of utmost urgency." His voice was low and urgent, though laced with the cultured inflection of the aristocracy. "You are Sherlock Holmes, are you not?" Holmes gestured toward a chair. "That is my name, and this is my associate, Doctor Watson. You seem to have come in great haste, Lord Fitzroy." The man started at the mention of his name. "You know me." Holmes permitted himself a faint smile. "Your signet ring bears the Fitzroy crest. Your boots, though well crafted, are specked with fresh mud, Hyde Park clay, if I am not mistaken. A man of your station, travelling alone through the rain at such an hour, can only be driven by dire necessity." Lord Henry Fitzroy exhaled sharply and sank into the chair, rubbing a hand across his brow. "You are correct, Mr. Holmes. I am in grave danger, and if you assist me, you may soon find yourself in peril as well." Holmes leaned forward, his keen gaze sharpening. "Then you had best begin at once, my lord. Tell me, who has sent you running through the night in fear?" Fitzroy leaned forward, his fingers clenched together as if in some silent plea. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have come to you not only for your renowned skills in detection, but because I fear that this matter extends beyond the grasp of Scotland Yard." Holmes regarded him with an expression of quiet amusement. "A bold assertion, my lord. Pray, continue." Fitzroy exhaled sharply. "It concerns the death of Sir Reginald Harrow, a man of unblemished loyalty to the Crown. He was found lifeless in his chambers at Buckingham Palace 2 nights ago. His death attributed to natural causes. A heart attack, they claim." "Yet you are unconvinced," Holmes interjected. Fitzroy nodded fervently. "I knew Sir Reginald well. He was in good health, a man of discipline and restraint. And there was one other thing." He hesitated before lowering his voice. "When his body was discovered, his right hand clutched a fragment of parchment. Upon it, there were traces of an unfinished Latin word, but before anyone could examine it further, the paper was confiscated by the palace authorities." Holmes steepled his fingers, his gaze sharpening. "Intriguing. And you, my lord, caught a glimpse of this fragment?" "Yes," Fitzroy affirmed, "only for a moment. I could not discern the entire word, but I believe it began with verit." Holmes's expression flickered with something akin to satisfaction. "Veritas," he murmured, "the Latin for truth." A chill passed over Fitzroy's face. If that was indeed what Sir Reginald intended to convey in his final moments, then it suggests that he had uncovered a truth so damning that he paid for it with his life. Holmes nodded. "Indeed. And if someone within the palace was desperate enough to suppress it, then we must tread with utmost caution." Fitzroy's voice dropped further, as though even within our private chambers he feared being overheard. "You must understand, Mr. Holmes, this is no ordinary case of foul play. Sir Reginald was privy to matters of the highest secrecy, affairs that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy." Watson, ever the practical man, furrowed his brow. "Surely, my lord, if such a crime had been committed, the authorities would investigate." Fitzroy gave a mirthless chuckle. "And whom do you suppose is controlling the investigation?" "The palace itself. The official report was closed before it had even begun." Holmes leaned back, tapping his fingers upon the arm of his chair. "And yet, my lord, you bring this matter to me. You risk much in doing so. Tell me, do you fear for your own safety?" Fitzroy hesitated before answering. "I do. The night following Sir Reginald's death, I received an anonymous letter warning me to stay silent or suffer the same fate." He reached into his coat and produced a crumpled sheet of parchment, its ink smudged from damp fingers. Holmes took it delicately, his eyes scanning the contents. Watson saw the change in his friend's expression, a flicker of interest that signified a case worth pursuing. Holmes studied the letter in silence before placing it carefully upon the table. "A crude attempt at intimidation," he remarked. "And yet, my lord, I suspect it has had the opposite effect. It has driven you here." Fitzroy's jaw tightened. "I could not stand idly by while an honourable man's death was swept into oblivion. But if you take this case, you must understand. You may be crossing a dangerous threshold." Holmes smiled faintly. "Danger has never been a deterrent, my lord. In fact, it often serves as an excellent incentive." Watson, however, felt a familiar unease settle in his chest. "Holmes, are you certain? If this is indeed tied to the highest levels of power, we may find ourselves entangled in forces beyond our reckoning." Holmes turned to him with a glint of amusement. "Then, my dear Watson, we must be prepared to reckon with them." He turned back to Fitzroy. "Very well, my lord. I accept your case." Fitzroy exhaled, half in relief, and half in apprehension. "Then may God help us all." Our cab rattled through the rain-slicked streets of London, its lantern casting flickering shadows against the mist that clung to the city like a spectral veil. Holmes sat opposite me, his fingers pressed together, his gaze fixed upon some unseen point in the distance, lost in the labyrinth of his own mind. "You have formed a theory already, Holmes?" I inquired, breaking the silence. "A theory, Watson, is a delicate thing, prone to premature destruction if one is careless with its foundation. At present, we have only fragments, but they are suggestive." He tapped his fingers lightly against the side of the carriage. "Consider, a man of robust health, found dead in his chambers. A supposed heart attack, yet he clutches a fragment of parchment inscribed with an unfinished Latin word. The body is scarcely examined before the case is closed, and those closest to him are warned into silence." "What does that tell you?" "That his death was no accident," I answered. "Precisely. And more than that, it tells us of urgency, of fear, and of a secret so perilous that even the whisper of it had to be stifled. That, Watson, is what makes this case so compelling." The carriage slowed, and we disembarked before the stately residence of Sir Reginald Harrow, its iron gates gleaming dully in the lamplight. Holmes stepped forward without hesitation, his sharp eyes already scanning the building's facade. "Observe," he murmured. The drapes in the study drawn at uneven lengths, the doorstep recently scrubbed, and the faintest indentation of a second carriage upon the gravel. Something, or someone, has been deliberately concealed here. I followed him up the steps, a sense of unease settling upon me. Whatever truth lay hidden within these walls, I feared that we were only beginning to grasp its enormity. The butler, a solemn fellow of advanced years, admitted us with a curt nod. "Sir Reginald's study has been left undisturbed, as per Lord Fitzroy's instructions," he informed us, leading us down a dim corridor. It was the place he was last seen before. Well, before they found him. Holmes offered no response, but as we entered the study, I saw the transformation take place in him. His languid manner vanished, replaced by an alertness that was almost predatory. His gaze swept the room, cataloguing every detail with ruthless efficiency. "Nothing has been moved?" he asked. "Nothing, sir." Holmes nodded, then strode to the centre of the room. "Watson, what do you see?" I glanced about. The room was handsomely furnished, the mahogany desk strewn with correspondence, the bookcases lined with volumes of law and history. Yet there was something unnatural in its arrangement, though I could not immediately name it. Holmes, however, had already honed in on the details. "The chair," he murmured, placing a hand upon the high-backed seat before the desk. "It is slightly askew, turned away from the writing table, as though someone else had been here before Sir Reginald." His fingers danced over the desk's surface. An ink smudge, still fresh, yet no open inkwell. And here? He plucked a volume from the shelf, inspecting its spine. "This book has been moved recently. Observe the fine layer of dust upon the others, but none upon this one." He flipped through the pages, pausing on one that bore a faint indentation, as though something had been pressed against it before being removed. His lips curved slightly. "A letter, Watson. A letter of great importance, I should think." At that moment, a soft creak sounded behind us. The butler, who had remained by the door, cleared his throat. "If you'll forgive me, sir, I would strongly advise discretion. Sir Reginald confided little, but he was troubled in his final days." I believe he suspected he was being watched. Holmes replaced the book and turned to the man with a piercing gaze. And was he correct? The butler hesitated, then inclined his head. I fear so, sir. Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression unreadable. Then, Watson, he said at last, we are dealing with a case far darker than we had imagined. Holmes remained in deep thought as we left the study, but I saw in his eyes that the scattered fragments of the case were already beginning to align in his remarkable mind. Our next inquiry led us to Mrs. Edith Grant, the housekeeper, a woman of advancing years whose face bore the weathered lines of both age and experience. You knew Sir Reginald well? I asked, as we were seated in a modest drawing room, away from the staff's quarters. For 20 years, sir, she replied, her voice edged with sorrow. I saw him rise in station, and I saw the burdens that came with it. Holmes leaned forward slightly. And were those burdens particularly great in his final days? The woman hesitated. I cannot say for certain, sir, but there was something in his manner. He was always a private man, but of late he seemed haunted. He would sit for long hours in his study, staring at nothing, as if trapped within some terrible thought. Did he confide in anyone? She shook her head. No, sir, but there was one night, not a week before his passing, when I found him pacing in his study long past midnight. He started when he saw me, as if I had caught him in some act of crime. And then he said something strange. What did he say? She hesitated, as though fearful of speaking the words aloud. He said, "There are forces beyond even the crown, Mrs. Grant, and I fear I have crossed them." Holmes's fingers drummed softly against the armrest. And after that, he sent for a man, a visitor I had never seen before. They spoke in hushed tones, and then Sir Reginald wrote something. A letter, I believe. The next morning the gentleman was gone, and Sir Reginald refused to speak of it. A letter, you say? Holmes' voice took on a sharper note. Did you see what became of it? No, sir, but I know it was important, for he locked it in his writing desk before retiring for the night. Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his lips forming a barely perceptible smile. Then it appears we have our next lead, Watson. Our next interview took us to James Cooper, Sir Reginald's personal valet, a man of precise manners and rigid posture, his expression betraying nothing, but his words carrying the weight of something unsaid. Holmes wasted no time. Mr. Cooper, you were in Sir Reginald's service for many years. Tell me, did you notice any particular change in his behaviour before his passing? The valet's lips pressed into a thin line. Sir Reginald was a man of habit, Mr. Holmes. He did not break from routine unless he had cause. And he had cause. Cooper hesitated before nodding. Yes, sir. The night before his death, he wrote a letter. Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. Indeed? And to whom was it addressed? That I do not know, sir, but I do know that he gave it to me personally, with strict instructions. It was to be delivered by hand, directly to the recipient, and to no one else. And did you carry out that instruction? Cooper's throat bobbed as he swallowed. No, sir. Before I could do so, Sir Reginald was dead. A pause settled between us. Holmes regarded him with a penetrating gaze. And what became of the letter? Cooper's hands clenched at his sides. It was taken, sir, by palace officials. They arrived within the hour of his passing and took everything, his papers, his journal, and that letter. They claimed it was of no consequence, but I could see it in their faces. They feared what it contained. Holmes leaned back, exhaling softly. So, Sir Reginald had uncovered something he was not meant to know. He put it into writing, and before that message could be delivered, he was dead. Cooper nodded solemnly. I cannot claim to know what the letter contained, but I know this. My master was a man of honour. If he went to his grave with a secret on his lips, it was because it was one that could change the course of history. Holmes rose abruptly, his gaze sharper than I had seen it that evening. Watson, I believe we are now in possession of a most inconvenient truth, one that someone went to great lengths to suppress. I felt the weight of his words settle over me. For the first time in our many cases together, I wondered if this was a truth that was never meant to be found. Holmes remained motionless for a long moment after the valet had finished his account. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, were fixed upon some unseen point, his mind already threading the scattered pieces of our investigation into a cohesive whole. At last he exhaled softly and turned to me. Watson, I do not believe we are merely dealing with a murder. We are dealing with a purge. A purge? I echoed, unsettled by the weight of the word. Consider what we now know, he continued, his tone brisk. Sir Reginald, a trusted royal aide, stumbles upon some forbidden knowledge grave enough that he takes the extraordinary step of committing it to writing. Before that letter can reach its recipient, he is found dead, his papers seized, his death hushed into the obscurity of an official report. He paused, his fingers steepled. There is no hesitation in the hand that strikes down a man so quickly. That is the work of an enemy with power, an enemy entrenched within the very halls of Buckingham Palace. A chill passed over me. Holmes, if what you say is true, then we are stepping into perilous ground indeed. Holmes permitted himself the ghost of a smile. My dear Watson, we have not merely stepped upon it, we are already waist-deep within it. I ran a hand over my brow. But what was the nature of this secret? What did Sir Reginald uncover that merited his death? Holmes rose, retrieving his coat with deliberate ease. That, my friend, is the question that will soon be answered. But mark my words, Watson, the answer will not be to everyone's liking. With that, he strode toward the door. I had seen him in many moods before, but there was something in his bearing that evening, some quiet certainty that made my pulse quicken with both fear and anticipation. Holmes had set his sights upon an adversary unseen, and whoever lurked in the shadows of this case, I had little doubt that they were already aware that Sherlock Holmes was coming for them. Holmes had been uncharacteristically quiet since we departed Sir Reginald's residence, his sharp gaze betraying the furious workings of his mind. It was only when we returned to Baker Street that he finally spoke. "The letter, Watson," he said, producing a folded sheet from his pocket. It would appear our departed friend left behind a warning far graver than we anticipated. The parchment was worn at the edges, the ink slightly smudged, but the words stood stark against the page. "To the one who finds this, know that the course is set, and the deception is near complete. A name that is not his own will rise, and history will be rewritten in ink and blood. I have seen the hand that forges it, and I know the truth. But the truth once known is a dangerous thing. If I do not deliver this myself, know that I have already paid the price." Holmes's fingers rested lightly on the paper, his voice measured. "A name that is not his own, Watson. This is no ordinary fraud. Sir Reginald spoke of a deception of monumental proportions." I felt the chill of his words settle over me. Then he knew something that could alter the very foundations of the monarchy. Holmes nodded. He discovered that a royal decree was falsified. Someone has been granted authority, perhaps even a title, that is not theirs by right. His eyes darkened. And men do not kill so swiftly for mere financial gain. This is something greater. The implications of such a crime staggered me. But who stands to benefit from such a forgery? Holmes gave me a thin smile. That, my dear Watson, is what we shall soon uncover. But first, we must determine exactly what was falsified and why Sir Reginald died for it. Holmes laid the letter aside and turned his attention to Lord Fitzroy's account. Tell me, Watson, what do you make of the fragment Sir Reginald was found clutching? I frowned. It could be any number of words. Veritas, perhaps, the Latin for truth. A spark of satisfaction lit Holmes's eyes. Precisely. And what does that tell you? That Sir Reginald intended to leave behind a message. Holmes tapped his fingertips together. And what better message for a man on the brink of exposing a conspiracy than the word truth? He knew the deception was in motion, and he sought to reveal it, though death claimed him before he could finish. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the case grow heavier with each revelation. Then the forgery we seek is one that alters the truth itself. Holmes stood abruptly, pacing the room with restless energy. We must consider this carefully, Watson. If a forged royal decree exists, it must concern something of immense significance. A mere title or estate would not warrant such ruthless measures. His hands clasped behind his back as he turned to me. History, my dear Watson, has shown us that power is the greatest prize of all. And what is the ultimate power, if not the power to rule? The realization struck me like a thunderclap. You believe this forgery is not merely financial, but one that could alter the line of succession? Holmes gave me a slow nod. It would explain everything. The urgency, the fear, the swiftness with which Sir Reginald was silenced. If he had proof that a claim to the throne had been falsified, then he was not merely a witness to a crime. He was a threat to the very fabric of the empire. A silence fell between us. For the first time in all our investigations, I felt a sense of unease that ran deeper than the usual dangers of our profession. We were no longer hunting a mere criminal. We were trespassing upon the affairs of the Crown itself. Holmes, however, was unfazed. His lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. Come, Watson, we have our path before us, and I intend to follow it. The question is, who else is following us? Holmes wasted no time in setting our course for the underbelly of London, where information, especially of the dangerous variety, could be found if one knew where to listen. We left Baker Street under the cover of night, our destination clear in Holmes's mind but unknown to me. Watson, he murmured as we walked, there are certain places where the affairs of men, no matter how high their station, trickle down like rain through the gutters. The streets we are about to tread have borne witness to more secrets, betrayals, and intrigues than the grandest halls of Buckingham Palace. I was well accustomed to Holmes's methods and his vast network of informants. Yet there was always an air of unease when we ventured into the depths of the city's criminal world. The man we sought was Elias Cobb, a notorious broker of secrets, whose knowledge of London's hidden affairs was as dangerous as it was valuable. The meeting was arranged in a tavern of ill repute, where the air was thick with pipe smoke and the glances of the patrons were heavy with suspicion. Holmes's presence, however, had a peculiar effect. Where most men might have drawn attention, he seemed to slip through unseen, as if he were merely another shadow in the room. Cobb, a wiry man with a scar that ran the length of his cheek, greeted us with a smirk that did not reach his eyes. Well, well, if it ain't Mr. Sherlock Holmes, he drawled. And what grand secret brings you to my door this time? Holmes did not waste words. A name that is not his own, Elias. Tell me, what have you heard of a forged royal decree? The smirk faded from Cobb's lips. He glanced around, then leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. You ought to be careful where you go asking that, Mr. Holmes. There's a lot of important people who'd rather that particular piece of parchment never sees the light of day. Holmes remained impassive. And yet here we are. Speak plainly, man. Cobb hesitated, then exhaled sharply. Word is, a name has been changed. A name that would shake the throne itself if anyone knew the truth. A title given where it ain't rightly due. I felt a chill at his words. Holmes, however, only nodded. And who, Elias, is responsible for this forgery? Cobb hesitated again, then muttered a single name. Lord Percival Brandon. The name meant nothing to me, but Holmes reacted as though a key piece had fallen into place. His expression remained composed, but there was a gleam in his eyes, one I had come to recognise as the mark of a deduction confirmed. Lord Percival Brandon, Holmes murmured. A man of cunning, ambition, and, if I am not mistaken, a past littered with convenient omissions. I furrowed my brow. Who is he, Holmes? A royal official of considerable influence, he replied. His family name carries weight, but his own rise has been marked by whispers rather than accolades. He has long been suspected of political manoeuvring, yet never before have I had cause to examine his dealings so closely. Cobb snorted. If you're looking for a man who knows how to rewrite history, he's your fellow. He's got his hands deep in the palace, and if he wanted a piece of paper to say black was white, well, he spread his hands. It'd be done before breakfast. Holmes's gaze sharpened. And would he have a man killed to keep it that way? Cobb's smirk returned. Mr. Holmes, if you have to ask, then you don't know Lord Percival Brandon. A silence settled between us. I could see the wheels turning in Holmes's mind, the web of deception becoming ever clearer to him. At last, he turned to me. Watson, we must move quickly. If Sir Reginald had proof of Brandon's forgery, then that proof must still exist, and if we do not find it, I fear no one will. I had seen Holmes pursue justice before, but there was a weight to his words now that unsettled me. We were no longer dealing with mere crime. We were treading in the affairs of the powerful, and those who dwelled in such circles did not suffer trespassers lightly. Holmes, however, seemed undeterred. He straightened his coat and gestured toward the door. Come, Watson. It is time Lord Percival Brandon received a visit from Sherlock Holmes. The carriage ride back to Baker Street was conducted in silence, though I could see the rapid calculations behind Holmes's hooded gaze. The name of Lord Percival Brandon had been revealed, and we now knew that a forged decree had been used to alter the course of history. The challenge before us was no longer merely to uncover the truth, it was to survive long enough to expose it. Holmes had only just turned the key in the door of 221B when he stopped abruptly. His shoulders stiffened, and without a word, he stepped aside. After you, Watson, he murmured. I hesitated, peering inside, and a wave of disarray met my eyes. The study, which Holmes kept in his own peculiar state of order, had been ruthlessly overturned. Papers lay scattered across the floor, drawers had been ripped from the desk, and our case notes, the meticulous records Holmes had compiled, were gone. By heavens! I cried, stepping inside. Holmes, this is no mere burglary. Someone has searched with purpose. Indeed, he said, already surveying the wreckage with a clinical detachment. He bent down, lifting a torn scrap of paper. It was one of our own notes, our theories regarding the forged royal decree. but it had been crumpled and discarded, suggesting that whoever had rifled through our records already knew the truth. Holmes straightened. They were in search of something specific, something they feared we had discovered. He glanced at the door. And yet, Watson, you will observe that they left no signs of forced entry. That suggests either great skill or access to a key. Then we have been followed? For some time, I should think. He glanced toward the fireplace, where the embers smouldered low. And I fear the misfortune does not end here. Where is Lord Fitzroy? It was then that I noticed the unopened telegram upon the floor, half trampled by a boot print. I snatched it up, unfolding it hastily. The message was brief and chilling. They know? Get out. I am being followed. F. double quote. Holmes read it over my shoulder. So they have him. A cold dread settled over me. Holmes, what do you mean? Holmes tossed the note onto the desk. I mean, Watson, that Lord Fitzroy is no longer in a position to speak with us. He has vanished. I felt a wave of helplessness. Then what course remains to us? If Fitzroy is taken and our records are gone... Holmes held up a finger. A single course, my dear Watson, to press forward. Our adversary believes he has struck a blow against us, but he has merely revealed his own desperation. If they are moving so openly, it is because they know how close we are to the truth. There was a knock at the door below, quick, urgent, and unmistakably meant for us. Holmes met my gaze, his expression unreadable. And if I am not mistaken, Watson, he murmured, we are about to receive a most unexpected visitor. Holmes stood at the window, gazing into the fog-laden streets below. The remnants of our ransacked sitting room remained untouched, a silent testament to the unseen hands that had torn through our work in the dead of night. Yet Holmes showed no trace of frustration. If anything, his sharp features bore an expression of quiet amusement. Our adversary has shown his hand, Watson, he said at last. He has overreached himself, revealing the very weakness we must exploit. And what weakness is that? I asked. Fear, Holmes replied, turning to me with a gleam in his eye. A man who fears exposure is easily led by the promise of security. We shall provide Lord Percival Brandon with precisely that, a path to silence the danger he believes still lurks in the shadows. I watched as he reached for his pen and, with the same careful precision that had solved countless cases, wrote a single note. The document still exists. If you wish to reclaim it, act quickly. The one who holds it will be at St. Ignatius Cathedral at midnight. Come alone. I could not suppress a shiver. And whom do you propose shall play the unfortunate messenger? Holmes smiled thinly. My dear Watson, you have often lamented that I keep you in the dark until the final act. Tonight I shall grant you centre stage. I started. You mean to send me in alone? Precisely. A man in possession of such a damning document would not be a figure skulking in the shadows. He would walk with confidence, certain of his leverage. Holmes met my gaze. And you, Watson, must become that man. I took a steadying breath, understanding now the full measure of my role. And if Percival does not come alone? Holmes's expression did not change. Then we shall ensure that he does not leave alone either. It was with a considerable sense of trepidation that I made my way towards St. Ignatius Cathedral that night, a lone figure wrapped in the chill of an autumn wind. The hour was late, the streets silent, but for the distant toll of a clock striking 12. I had accompanied Holmes into many perils before, but never had I played the bait in such a deadly game. As I stepped inside, The vastness of the cathedral swallowed me. The candles burned low, their flickering glow casting long shadows upon the stone walls. The hush of the place pressed upon me like a silent warning. Holmes had chosen well. There were no easy avenues for escape. I walked to the appointed spot near the altar, my heart pounding with every step. I was to play the part of a man who held the power of life and ruin in his hands. I adjusted my stance, recalling Holmes's words. "Confidence, Watson. They must believe you are untouchable." A sound broke the stillness. Footsteps, measured, deliberate. From the shadows a figure emerged, Lord Percival Brandon. He was a man of striking presence, his aristocratic bearing unmistakable even in the dim light. His eyes, cold and assessing, locked onto mine. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Doctor." "Watson," he said smoothly, "do you know what you're playing with?" I met his gaze evenly. "I know enough," his lips curled. "Then hand it over." I did not move. "And what assurance do I have that you will not silence me as you did Sir Reginald?" His expression flickered. Whether with amusement or irritation, I could not tell. "You overestimate your importance, Doctor. You are a mere inconvenience." His hand moved slightly, and I caught the glint of something concealed beneath his coat. A revolver. Holmes had been right. Percival had not come alone. I exhaled slowly. Time was slipping through my fingers. Where was Holmes? "You are mistaken about one thing, Lord Percival," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "And what is that?" I allowed myself a small smile. "I am never alone." At that moment, a new shadow detached itself from the darkness behind him. The trap had been sprung. Lord Percival Brandon took a measured step forward, his presence commanding, yet his eyes flickered with something beyond confidence. Calculation. Though his lips curled into the semblance of a smile, there was no warmth in it, only the cold certainty of a man who believed himself to be the master of the situation. "Dr. Watson," he said smoothly, his voice barely rising above the vast stillness of the cathedral. "You seem to have stumbled into matters far beyond your reckoning." I stood firm. "That may be so, Lord Percival, but I assure you I am well aware of what I hold." He studied me for a moment before giving a slow nod. At this, two men stepped forward from the shadows, their hands resting ominously upon the folds of their coats. They were not mere footmen or hired muscle. There was a military precision to their stance, the mark of men accustomed to following orders without hesitation. "You see, Doctor, I am not a man who enjoys unpleasantness," Percival continued, his tone almost conversational, "but I cannot allow a mere physician to meddle in affairs that do not concern him. You have something that belongs to me. Kindly return it, and I shall ensure your night ends peacefully." I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to remain still. "And if I refuse?" Percival sighed. "Then I shall be forced to correct your mistake." He made a slight gesture, and the two men took another step forward. I willed myself to hold my ground. Holmes had given strict instructions: play the part, delay as long as possible. And yet, standing there beneath the high stone arches of the cathedral, with the weight of their unflinching gazes upon me, I could not help but wonder, had Holmes miscalculated? "You misunderstand, my lord," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am not here to bargain. The truth has already been set in motion." A flicker of irritation crossed his features. "Enough of this. Give me the document." "Why, when you already have it?" I countered. That gave him pause. "What do you mean?" I allowed myself a knowing smile. "You ensured Sir Reginald Harrow's silence, but not before he wrote the letter." not before he entrusted a copy of the decree to a man beyond your reach. And now you stand here, proving to me that you fear its existence." Percival's jaw tightened. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" The air between us crackled with tension. And then, at last, Holmes made his move. From the darkness beyond the cathedral's pillars, a voice rang out, calm, precise, and unmistakable. "Quite the dilemma, is it not, Lord Percival?" Percival spun, his hand darting to his coat, but he was too late. Sherlock Holmes stepped into the candlelight, his sharp gaze coolly appraising the scene before him. From the shadows behind him emerged two more figures, Detective Inspector Lestrade and two armed constables. I saw the briefest flicker of panic in Percival's expression before he mastered himself. "This is outrageous," he barked. "On what grounds do you interfere?" Holmes smiled faintly. "On the grounds that you have just provided us with precisely what we needed, a confession." Percival scoffed. "A confession? I have admitted to nothing." Holmes exhaled in mock disappointment. "Come now, my lord. You stood before Dr. Watson, surrounded by armed men demanding a document you supposedly know nothing about. You spoke of a correction that must be made, and most damningly of all, you betrayed the very fear that Sir Reginald sought to expose, that the truth, despite all your efforts, would not remain buried." Lestrade took a step forward. "That's quite enough for me." He nodded to his men. "Take him." Percival's hand twitched, but he knew resistance was futile. "This is madness," he spat. "You cannot prove a thing." Holmes tilted his head. "On the contrary, Lord Percival, I believe in time you shall find that we prove everything." And with that, the great Lord Percival Brandon, the man who had tried to rewrite history, was led away into the night. Lord Percival Brandon barely had time to react before Lestrade and his men closed in, the click of revolvers marking the end of his desperate scheme. His face, which only moments ago bore the confidence of a man above reproach, twisted into something between rage and disbelief. "You fools!" he spat, jerking his arm away as Lestrade grasped his wrist. "Do you know who I am?" Holmes, ever composed, adjusted his cuffs before answering. "Indeed, my lord, you are a man who sought to rewrite history with ink and treachery. But, as you see, even the most careful forgeries cannot erase the truth indefinitely." Percival turned a cold glare upon him. "You cannot prove a thing. I demand to see the charges." Holmes sighed. "The charges will be quite extensive, I assure you. Forgery of state documents, the suppression of evidence, and, if I am not mistaken, the conspiracy to commit murder." A muscle twitched in Percival's jaw. "You have no witness," he said through gritted teeth. Holmes gave a faint smile. "On the contrary, you have provided the most damning testimony of all, your own words." He gestured toward the arching shadows of the cathedral, where two figures emerged, Scotland Yard officers, who had been listening all along. Percival's bravado faltered. His eyes darted toward the exits, his mind already calculating some desperate escape. But it was futile. The net had closed, and his fate was sealed. Holmes turned to me with quiet amusement. "Well, Watson, I believe the matter is now in the hands of the law." And with that, Lord Percival Brandon was led away, his power undone, his name destined for infamy. 2 days had passed since the fateful night at St. Ignatius Cathedral, and in that time, the full extent of Lord Percival Brandon's deception had begun to emerge. The case, once shrouded in secrecy and danger, had now become a matter of public scandal. Holmes and I sat in the familiar comfort of 221B Baker Street. The morning papers spread before us. The headlines were damning. Aristocrat arrested in treasonous plot, and forgery and murder a peer's downfall. The details, though still carefully guarded, had been leaked in whispers across London's elite circles. Lestrade had visited that morning, bringing with him an official report. "It's worse than we thought, Holmes," he had admitted grimly. "The forged decree, well, it wasn't just a title Brandon sought to alter. It was a matter of royal inheritance." Holmes, who had listened in silence, now spoke. "A clever scheme, Watson. Brandon sought to manipulate the line of succession itself. He intended to place a man, perhaps even himself, in a position of authority he had no right to hold." I exhaled sharply. "Then Sir Reginald Harrow discovered the deception and sought to expose it." Holmes nodded. "Precisely. That is why he wrote the letter, and why he clutched that fragment of parchment upon his death. He knew the forgery had already taken effect, but he believed that truth, veritas, must still find its way to the surface." Lestrade sighed, rubbing his brow. "It will take weeks to sort through the evidence, but it's enough to see Brandon charged with forgery, conspiracy, and murder. He won't see the light of day again." Holmes leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Justice, Inspector, is a peculiar thing. The law may see him imprisoned, but history shall see him erased." That evening, as the last embers of the fire smouldered in the grate, Holmes indulged in a rare moment of reflection. He turned toward me, the faintest trace of amusement in his gaze. "You are puzzling over something, Watson." I set my teacup aside. "It is simply astonishing, Holmes, how you saw what no one else could. The letter, the unfinished Latin word, even the ink blot on Sir Reginald's desk. Each piece, insignificant on its own, yet together they formed a deadly truth." Holmes gave a small nod. "Consider, Watson, the ink blot, the simplest of clues, yet the most revealing. It indicated that a document of great importance had been altered. Sir Reginald had been reviewing the forgery when he was interrupted, likely by the very man who ended his life." "And the parchment in his hand?" I prompted. "A desperate final act," Holmes mused. "The word veret was not merely a fragment. It was his last effort to leave a clue, to say veritas, truth. Even in death, he fought to reveal what had been buried." I nodded slowly. "And yet, had we not intervened, the truth would have been lost." Holmes smiled faintly. "Perhaps, Watson, but truth has a curious habit of persisting, even when men would rather it remain forgotten." I watched him as he lit his pipe, his expression unreadable. "And do you believe this will be the last such conspiracy we uncover?" Holmes exhaled a thin plume of smoke. "Hardly. London, my dear Watson, is built upon secrets. Some men hide them. Others," he glanced at me with that familiar knowing look, "prefer to uncover them." And with that, he turned his gaze to the fire, lost once more in the great and terrible machinery of his own mind. It was on the evening following Lord Percival Brandon's arrest that we received an unexpected visitor. The hour was late when a familiar yet haggard figure was ushered into our sitting room at Baker Street. Lord Henry Fitzroy, pale and gaunt, stood before us, a man who had clearly endured much in the preceding days. "Fitzroy!" I exclaimed, rising at once. "We feared the worst." He sank into a chair, rubbing a trembling hand across his face. "You had cause to," he admitted. "I was taken, seized from my own home the night before I was due to meet you again. They warned me, Holmes. They said if I spoke a word, if I even thought of exposing what I knew, I would not live to see another day." Holmes regarded him keenly. "And yet, here you are, my lord." Fitzroy let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a shudder. I had little choice. They did not intend to keep me alive much longer. I was moved from place to place, blindfolded, locked in darkness, and told repeatedly that I had meddled in affairs beyond my understanding. But something changed yesterday. My captors became agitated. One of them muttered about Brandon's arrest, and within hours I was left alone in an empty house, the doors unlocked. It was clear they no longer had a reason to hold me. Because their leader had fallen, Holmes supplied. Yes, Fitzroy said. I can only assume that once Brandon was caught, his men lost their resolve. I had been a pawn in their game, a loose end to be tied up, nothing more. I shook my head. You were far more than that, my lord. You were the last man to speak to Sir Reginald Harrow, the final link in this chain of deception. Fitzroy nodded slowly. And if not for you both, I doubt I would be here at all. I owe you my life. Holmes waved a hand dismissively. Think nothing of it, my lord. A life is saved, a crime is exposed, and history remains unaltered. That is satisfaction enough. The Fitzroy matter was soon concluded, with his testimony adding yet another layer of damning evidence against Lord Percival Brandon. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting upon the sheer enormity of what we had uncovered. I shared my thoughts with Holmes over breakfast. It is staggering, Holmes. A single forgery, had it gone undiscovered, might have altered the course of British history. A name changed, a birthright stolen, and an empire deceived. Holmes, who had been perusing the morning paper, barely glanced up. Indeed, Watson. And yet one must wonder, how many such alterations have already taken place? How many truths have been erased before they could even be questioned? I set my cup down. It is a chilling thought. A necessary one, he countered. This affair is but a single thread in a tapestry woven by powerful hands. We were fortunate this time to pull at it before it became too deeply embedded. But there will be others, Watson. There always are. I could not deny the truth of his words. Even as we sat in the relative peace of Baker Street, I knew that somewhere in London, behind locked doors and whispered conversations, another deception was already being set into motion. Holmes seemed to read my thoughts, for he gave a rare, knowing smile. Come now, Watson, you look positively haunted. The monarchy still stands, history remains unchanged, and we have for once the luxury of a quiet evening. I chuckled despite myself. I suppose, Holmes, that is as much as we can hope for. Precisely, my dear fellow, he said, reaching for his pipe. As the last embers of the fire glowed in the grate that evening, I found myself still turning the case over in my mind. The enormity of it, the implications of what had almost been accomplished in the shadows of power, left a lingering unease. Holmes, meanwhile, remained as unshaken as ever. He sat in his chair, his long fingers steepled, a thin plume of smoke rising from his pipe. You are troubled, Watson, he remarked at last, without looking up. Not troubled, Holmes, simply thoughtful. It is not often that we stand upon the threshold of history itself. Holmes exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. History, my dear Watson, is a curious thing. It is shaped not only by great men, but by quiet hands in the dark, by scribes, by forgery, by those who know that ink can be as mighty as steel. I considered this in silence. Then what does that make us? I asked at last. Holmes gave a small smile. Merely the ones who ensure that the ink tells the right story. He rose then, stretching slightly, and moved toward the window, gazing out at the gaslit streets below. This city, Watson, thrives on secrets. Tonight, we have uncovered one, but by tomorrow, another shall take its place. He turned back toward me. His face cast half in shadow, and there was something almost amused in his tone as he added, "And I suspect, my dear friend, that we shall find ourselves uncovering it soon enough." With that, he tapped the ashes from his pipe, and as if the matter were of no more importance than an idle conversation, retired for the night. I sat there a moment longer, listening to the faint sounds of London beyond the window, and could not help but wonder how many more truths lay just beyond our reach, waiting for the sharp mind of Sherlock Holmes to bring them into the light. Holmes sat in his chair, the glow of his pipe casting a faint wisp of smoke into the air. His gaze, thoughtful, yet detached, was fixed upon some distant point beyond the window, as if the vast machinery of London's intrigues were already setting the stage for another mystery. I leaned forward. "Holmes, do you not find it astonishing? A single forged document, hidden within the labyrinth of power, nearly reshaped history itself. Had we not uncovered it, the truth may have been lost forever." Holmes exhaled slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "My dear Watson, history is little more than a collection of narratives, some true, some false, and many carefully rewritten to suit the needs of the moment. Men like Lord Percival Brandon do not create lies, they simply rearrange what is already there. The true crime is not in the deception itself, but in believing that no one will ever question it." I considered this. Then the lesson here is that no secret remains buried forever. Holmes turned to me with a knowing glance. "No secret, Watson. Only those that have yet to be uncovered." He tapped his pipe against the edge of the mantelpiece and turned toward his violin. "But tell me, Watson, what do you believe was Brandon's greatest mistake? Was it the forgery itself, or the arrogance to think he could silence the truth indefinitely? What do you think? Did Lord Percival's downfall come from his crime or his overconfidence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy unraveling Sherlock Holmes's greatest cases, subscribe for more thrilling mysteries, and share this case with fellow detective fiction lovers. The game is always afoot. Will you be ready for the next mystery?